Welcome, everybody. This is Priyanka Jain from Airing, and you're listening to the Analytics Cafe podcast, the show that sheds light on practical analytics and data science topics for people in business who love to put data to work.
And today our topic is all about AI and learning analytics. I have the pleasure of talking with Stella Lee, who's the director at Paradox Learning. Welcome, Stella.
Hi, Priyanka. Thank you for having me.
Yes, such a pleasure. I'm so excited about this conversation. I'm looking forward to learning a lot. So, before we get into our conversation, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. As you say, my name is Stella. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada. Kind of sunny today. I have about 20 years of experience primarily in online learning. I started as an academic. I got my PhD in computer science, and also I have a background in art and design. And then I had kind of moved my way out, or mostly from academia into consulting. So I've been doing my consulting work for the past 6 years.
And you have an incredible background that this combination of computer science and then learning and the psychology is this. It's like you're the Venn diagram actually never exists. The kind you bring in, and that's why you're known for your sort of thought leadership in this field. And I'm so excited that we'll get to talk about it. So without much ado, what is learning analytics?
I think it's still a relatively emerging field. So the definitions, as you know, it varies, but I think I like to define it more broadly. It's just simply a collections of tools that allow you to collect, record, and analyze the data that is generated by our learners, and through their learning interactions with different systems, and through the analysis of that data, it allows us to gain insights, and more importantly, to do something about it, to provide some intervention and some actionable insights that we can actually act on.
Learn from that. And for the context for the audience and the listeners on the podcast, basically we are talking in the context of HR and learning and the internal universities in large corporations, and where thousands of people are learning. And from a L&D perspective, or learning and development perspective, you are thinking about, great, before, when my small organization was smaller, I had 20 people. I could talk to them and see what kind of learning they need, and I put in some courses, and now the scales is thousands and tens of thousands. How can a learning manager and a learning L&D person serve their internal client to learn appropriately? And so the learning analytics, Stella, as you're talking about, is the analytics applied to this whole thing about how well learning is happening in this organization towards whatever goal they have set out to be. So
Exactly.
the follow-up is, why should people care about learning analytics?
Well, I think great question, and I think first of all, we're dealing with increasingly in L&D and in higher education, even at K through 12 level, we deal with so many more different technologies and tools and platforms, right? We have, traditionally we have the learning management system, or LMS, where a lot of data comes from. You get perhaps your e-libraries, maybe your internal knowledge management repositories. You might have an informal learning network or social learning network. You get discussion forums. So they all produce data, different type of data. And so it's a waste not to make use of that. I think that's one reason. The other reason, which is a huge motivation for me too, about why should I care about learning analytics, is that as an L&D professional, you put a lot of effort and love into creating good learning experience for your target learners. But oftentimes you felt like you launch a course, you've even in a classroom session, you facilitated a session, or you put out some content out there, like what we're doing with podcasts, and then you don't know, you wanted to know, did it do any good? Are people actually learning? Did I cover, as an educator, you might wonder, am I aiming at the right level? Are there any things that people find difficult to understand, right? I think especially gaining insights on, this is a difficult concept. Did I cover it sufficiently? or is it too much that people are overwhelmed?
Yeah.
It is, and historically we ask people to like surveys or interviews.
Exactly.
That is also learning analytics, right? That is one piece of like smaller data. So we always done that. I think now we just have a more holistic or 360 view of looking at it from a bigger data perspective, and to connect with that small data, the observational data that we've been doing all along. And so that's what I feel really strongly about, is like I actually get to like answer this question better. Did it do any good? Did people actually learn? Like are there gaps? How can we improve the content? And then the third point I want to make about why should you care, especially now during COVID and post-COVID, is that I think lots of organizations are under tremendous pressure, right, to make sure that we optimize our resources, make sure that what we're doing is contributing directly to the business outcomes. I think L&D is being held much more accountable during this time to say, like, are we allocating these resources wisely? Are we optimizing things? Like, are we training people where they need to be trained? Are we, under training them or overtraining them in certain areas? I think that accountability piece is much more important now than, like, not that we didn't hold ourselves accountable, but I think now it's just really coming to the forefront.
Right, because the margins we had before, from the business perspective, the margins we had before, we don't have it anymore, right?
Exactly.
And so people need to be, our managers, our individual employees need to be smarter about leveraging data to make decisions.
Absolutely.
And they need better skills. So I think one of the things that the L&D folks are being asked a lot is for data literacy skills. Amongst others, amongst other technical skills, amongst other business skills, but data literacy is showing up as a huge, thick pattern
and a huge gap in that.
And a huge gap, right?
Yeah.
Because, and typically when we go into organizations, we find like less than 10, like teens, 10, 12, 15% of people at the right level of data literacy.
That's right.
Initially I was shocked because I was thinking, just there's some gap. There are huge gaps where people are, they are serving as a marketing analyst and they don't have the right level of data literacy. Or they are even a call center person who should be able to analyze their own calls information. They don't have the right level of data. They don't not even able to analyze their own data, leave alone anything else, right?
Well, and then sometimes they don't even know what questions to ask, and to realize that data have answers for them, right?
Yeah.
And I think and other reason I think now is a good time is, and I think you would agree, is that the tools are getting easier to use. They're getting more sophisticated. They're more user friendly, and it's not like back in the days when, like, you felt like analytics is for researchers. It's for people in educational institutions or in a lab. And now I think it's much more accessible, for just an everyday person to analyze a set of data.
We have so much data around us. I mean, our what we have, our what is it? Smart watches have data and telling us how many steps we've taken, right? Or what our heart or sleeping rhythm was, and so on. I don't wear one, by the way, but but it's just but so much measurement is there. And so for going back to learn L&D people, L&D folks, it's more because one is that pre-survey, post-survey, okay, that was so 1990s. We now have tools which can tell you how engaging was this video or this clip or this quiz or whatever else. How long did somebody even stay on this page? Or all of the intent, the behavioral part, all of that can be translated, or is being translated into data that you can potentially learn to not only just say, hey, pre and post, this program work, but did this program work for this person?
Right, much more granular level, and I think what I love too, like pre and post has its place. I think it's still useful. But what I think what learning analytics is so amazing is the ability to provide feedback at the time of need, right? And not like, you took this course 6 weeks ago. Here's some insights. It's not like it might help. I think it would still help the instructors and the instructional designers to get that insight, and how do you improve for your next cohort, for your next groups of learners. But for the learners themselves, I think it's very powerful to say, once you interacted with this one thing online, it dynamically generate some feedback for you to say, based on this interaction, an opportunity to say personalize that learning experience, or to adjust to a different level as you go along, or to give you feedback and say, hey, I see that you spend only a very short amount of time on this content, let's switch it up for you. So I think that's what's really powerful, is to get that live feedback and hyper customization at the time of need.
That's great. And so now going back to our main topic, AI and learning analytics. So why and how AI is being applied or can be applied in learning analytics?
Yeah, and I think I was just chatting to you earlier, and I felt like it's almost it's getting to the point AI is almost redundant in learning analytics. It's implicit that we are always using a piece of AI or machine learning technology, in learning and in analytics, right? In measurement, in prediction. I think it's not necessarily AI. I'm not advocating every piece of learning analytics have to be AI enabled, but I think there are a lot more applications out there that incorporate AI. If that makes sense, if it helps you automate a process, I think AI is just making things easier, right? It makes it, it can automate process. It can aggregate large sets of data. It could help us make sense of and coming up with patterns to understand things. So, for example, when we talk about personalized learning, when you're dealing with a lot of content, in the past, humans will handpick them manually, right? To say, okay, Priyanka, you're at this level, you're an expert in data, so your learning needs are very different than somebody just starting in this journey of understanding data. So I think these are the content that you should look into to deepen your knowledge. I have to hand pick those for you. But AI, what is great is that you can do this at a larger scale with massive amount of content, and still able to come up with some sort of pattern and say, okay, for experts like you with this kind of profile and this kind of knowledge and this kind of understanding, these are the content that are good for you. So I think AI just makes things easier in pushing out and dealing with learning analytics at scale. It also able to perhaps do things a little bit differently, able to zoom into a very subset of data and help us triangulate the data better. To say, make a prediction on how likely are you failing this course, or how likely are you are successful in completing the course, right? It can help you make predictions about things.
Or even go dot to how likely you're to retain this employee based on all of their learning thing, as well as what else they have been doing.
Succession planning, for example. Like how likely is this person able to, I think there's even, there's an internal learning analytics engine that I've seen with a company in Europe, and they would analyze an employee's CV, and based on the keyword match of a CV, it produces an employability score, a percentile. And based on that percentile, it would also flag skill gaps for you, right? And then recommend learning intervention based on the skill gaps in the employability score. So that's one way of supporting learning across the organization, and not just looking at one piece of learning. Yeah.
So these
So
advanced technologies like machine learning, neural networks, and AI is essentially enabling us to process larger amount of data points and potentially be able to hyper personalize offerings to individuals. So so that somebody doesn't have to do this massive work of grid work of employee by employee recommending.
yeah,
It just doesn't work. So I'm hearing recommendation as one of the applications. I
yeah,
also heard just from the CV perspective, which sort of was like it was making me think about, oh, that all then is a function of the keywords I put in my CV and so
yeah,
on. So
yeah.
what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the limitations in this, this endless application of
Oh,
AI?
how much time do we have?
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna also say the other thing about learning analytics that why do we use AI is also we have access now to data that we might not consider data before, right? I think we talk about biometrics, like you don't,
Right.
when you talk about measuring steps with like a Fitbit, like did we think about that as data point before? No,
Yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
now
We have new
your
data.
your
Yeah.
body is it's data,
Yeah.
and it is not something we thought of as data before this whole thing came about. So I think it also helped us think it through, well, what constitutes data, like what
Yeah.
can we measure. It
Yeah.
also changed the notion of like what we consider measurable for
Yeah.
learning and for many other
Yeah.
things in life. But let's get back to the limitations and challenges and stuff. I mean, it's just like any new technology, there are many limitations and challenges. I think the one that we often talk about is what we call black box algorithm. I'm sure you're familiar with that. I'm
Yeah.
sure you deal with that in your own work.
Yeah.
But for learning, I think it's problematic because decisions are being made for learners without really understanding, the learner necessarily understand what assumptions are being made, right? Like when you're recommending content, how do you arrive at the decision of this type of content are made that are good for you? Like,
Yeah.
how do you know that like Amazon as an example, not it's a learning example, but I think it's an example that I think everybody can relate to. When they recommend books to me, how like is it based on like it's based on my past behavior, but it's also based on perhaps people like me who purchased this one book also purchased these other books. But how do you come up with the people like me? Like what assumptions are you making about me to say these are people like just like you? Is it based on the books? Is it based on demographic information? Is it based on geographic location? So it's very difficult to know if that system is not open for you to examine, to reveal, and also to push back and say, no, I actually don't like books that are over 600 pages long. To say, well, please don't ever recommend this to me. And learning is very tricky because, of course, it is one thing to say the learners don't like it, but just because they don't like it, is it good for them? Just because people don't like to take vitamins, like, well, you still should take vitamins. So I think there's a nuance there between having learner to control and push back, and also having perhaps instructors and instructional designer to review the system to say, I think this recommendation is good for learners to challenge them a little bit, to get them out of the comfort zone. But
So I think
that's not open for us to even look at.
Yeah, and what this is also making me think, so let's say there's a data scientist sitting in your organization and a few data scientists, and they're building these kind of algorithms. But as a learning and development manager or a leader, if you don't understand, you don't have enough data literacy to understand the constraints, the explainability. Like you don't understand the boundaries of how these decisions, even false positive, false negative. If you don't understand, like there is no statistics here, and there's a X% of time it's going to be falsely negative, and so on and so forth. How you can't bring it up. So I think what I'm trying to, and perhaps your comments on how important data literacy is for even the L&D folks, even though they may not be hands-on building a machine learning or data, NN model, But
Oh,
for them
there should be a baseline awareness, right?
yeah.
And comprehension about how these things are impacting your organization. I
Yeah.
think if you don't know that your LMS, for example, it's collecting data,
Yeah.
and you have to like look into like, are these data being collected justified? You know, do you need all of that? Because there's also the danger of now that technology can collect all sorts of things, but just because they can, should you?
From the privacy
And
perspective, are you saying from the privacy?
from my
Okay.
privacy, from my, you know, surveillance,
Yeah.
and also like from even a human resource perspective, do you want to spend time analyzing this data set that actually does not inform you about
Yeah.
learning? I
Not
think
every piece of data is equally, holds equal information. And so what's
exactly. So
relevant?
you need to make decisions as an
Yeah.
L&D manager to say, well, let's focus more on collecting data that actually tell us about learner engagement.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? That you need to translate into or break it down into what is observable, what's measurable, and how do you then connect those data into some feedback systems to say, well, okay, we get this insight, now what are we going to do about it, right? And that's all back to your point about having the baseline data literacy as the work that you've been doing of trying to get organizations to up their level a little bit, right? In terms of like, at least able to ask these questions.
Yes, because data doesn't speak, it only answers to intelligent questions. If you ask intelligent questions, you'll get intelligent answers back.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we can, Laurie, Stella, we can talk endlessly about this. But one thing I want to say, I want to bring it back to our practical. Like all of this is great. Where should the organize? How should they get started on this journey?
Yeah, I think the first thing, if you want to get started in, you know, applying learning analytics, is you define your challenge, define your learning analytics challenge. You know, because like we're saying, many technologies would give you analytics. It would give you analytics on your completion rate, your attrition rate, the test scores. But like, is this addressing questions you want answers for, right? So you have to think about what are your pain points, what are some issues that you really want to know
answers to.
why are people doing that, or how is this being done, or like just like what are
the agenda, the roadmap. You need you need a learning analytics roadmap.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's helping you to solve this challenge, right? So you have to start, what I can always say, begin with the end in mind. Like start with like at the end, what do you want the answers for? And then I think then you need to figure out like what are the metrics, like what are the metrics for successfully answering this question that you have. So just make sure you have the metrics that you can measure, right? You can observe, you can, you know, you can collect. And then you need to know like where your data coming from. Like, do you have data? Because, you know, lots of L&D is still very paper based. So you have to have data that you can get to collect. Data exists sometimes across different platforms. Do you have access to them? Do you know where to look for them? So I think just even to do like an audit of like, where are the data, where does it sit, who owns them, how can I ask for them, what kind of data do I need to ask for? And then you know the part that I think I love the most that people often overlook is like, how do you ensure your data quality? Because data analysts, I think I seen one research, they say they spend like about 60 to 70% on data cleansing, like huge, right? Like more. So I think that's one part that people easily overlook is like, do you have contaminated data, or you know, do you have quality data that you can use? Like how do you get to the quality data part? So you're comparing apple and apple. So you're not like comparing different things. So make sure you have people that you can, you know, clean your data with. And then finally, I think to also identify what kind of learning analytics tools you have in place already. that you can use. A lot of LMS have some more basic analytics functions that you can start there, but mostly I think people tend to export the data from there and plug it into more of a business intelligence or other data analytics tools externally. So you need to do an audit of like what's already in place and what tools we can use.
Makes sense. And I like your sort of like start with the end in the mind. Sort of, and the way we this is the what you described is what we describe as 3 key questions framework. How do you begin answering a question? We use it in generally in the sense of analytics, and your specific, you're talking about learning analytics. It's there in my book also, Behind Every Good Decision. We call it 3 key questions, where you start from the end in the mind, with the end in mind. So you talk about the top key metrics, then you talk about driver metrics, what drives those metrics, and then you think about what kind of data I need to be, what kind of projects do I need to be able to answer those questions.
We're basically talking about the same thing. Exactly. We're on the same page.
Yes, I like that alignment, and I hope folks got value out of it. So for folks who are looking to connect with you, Stella, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I of course email Stella at paradoxlearning.com or through my website, but I'm often most active on LinkedIn. So just Stella Lee on LinkedIn is where I engage most of the conversations. I'm also on Twitter at Stella L. I also post and share lots of insights and what other people are doing as well.
That's great.
As what a delight. Lots of great information out there.
Yes. And what a great delight it has been for me to chat with this.
Thank you so much. It's such a great, I had so much fun talking with you. So thank you for having me here again.
Absolutely. And for folks and audiences out here, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please comment and like and share. And we'll see you guys in the next cafe.